dancing round the grave. Could offer you my whole stay. See you on the trail. Could offer you some courtesy.
This is Jimmy Jive, and you're listening to Motor City Rock Talk. Tonight, I've got an artist from an exciting band called the Sisters of the Sunshine Vapor, a very cool, psychedelic, sort of progressive rock band with some modernistic type stylings, very mesmerizing. To date, they've got 6 full-length albums, their newest being called Nocturnal Train to Mars. Really, really interesting stuff. Like I said, really cool harmonies and melodies, just outstanding stuff. So anyway, tonight my guest is the guitarist and vocalist of this band, Mr. Sean Morrow. How you doing, bud?
Hey man, how's it going? I will have to correct on the progressive. I don't think we play enough actual proper music to be considered that.
I think you guys do. I think you guys are really on top of it. Anyway, let's start with a little background. Tell me a little bit about where you're from originally and maybe some of the musical influences, bands, artists, or whatever that got you into not only playing guitar, but the way you develop your style, in other words, for the band.
I grew up in kind of the west suburbs of Michigan, southwest suburban area. I actually started playing guitar when I was 7, just like some class they offered at like the school library, or stuck with it. And when the class was over, I didn't continue. And then when I was 15, I begged my mom for a guitar again. So I had this weird period of time in between being 7 years old and almost 15 that I didn't play it. And then for whatever reason, got excited about it. And I remember watching George Harrison's Set On You video. And for whatever reason, that just really wanted to make me play the guitar again. And so when I was 15, my mom bought me an acoustic for my 15th birthday.
So you started out playing acoustic then?
Yep. So the next year I cut lawns and stuff and saved up a bunch of money and got enough to buy like a second-rate amp and a white Washburn with a Lloyd Rose tremolo.
Who would you say then, coming up and stuff, were some of the bands or the artists that you might have listened to that really inspired you?
Back then, definitely more of from a classic rock upbringing perspective. Things like Rush. I remember some of the first songs learning to play was Working Man by Rush and things like that. Scorpions, for sure, just that power rock, power metal kind of stuff. And then as, the years went by, more just quintessential classic rock like Boston and Journey and things like that.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, and then in my later teens, kind of got into punk and different stuff, and it's always been like a roadmap of different music for me. And
you're also the vocalist in a band. Did you start out singing at an early age too? Did you do any of that in school, or did you just eventually become the vocalist in the band?
I had a couple leads in some school musicals, but nothing I ever practiced or thought about or considered. And then I think, back in my early 20s playing in a punk rock band, nobody could really sing. Not that good. It's good to sing that kind of music, but I just kind of by default did it. And then from there, just kind of, built around that. So
Now, when you mentioned early punk bands, what were some maybe the bands that you may have played in the Detroit area before the Sisters?
This would have been there was this stint probably 97-ish. I was in this band called the Violators. It was kind of short-lived. Maybe it was like a year and a half or under 2 years. And then nothing that, in between that and doing the Sisters now, there wasn't like a whole lot of, you'd spend all this time finding guys, putting a band together, getting enough material to play like one show, and then somebody would flake or something, and you'd have to just start all over again. So
now, how did you get together with the guys that are in Sisters of the Sunshine Vapor? How did the band come about?
It's an interesting story. So Eric, the bassist, and I want to feel like there's a point, probably it was like '04, I want to say. My brother and I had just bought this house and it had this really cool basement barn. And, part of the reason was like, I want to have my own practice space.
Right.
Get something going again, because there was probably like a year stretch that I hadn't played in a band in my early 20s, and that was probably the first. And I jammed with a couple different people and nothing really materialized. I forgot what it was, some sort of like Detroit forum or something. And I wrote Eric. I think he wrote me back. This would have probably been like maybe like winter time, and he wrote me back saying he was playing with somebody else. I think he tried out for like the Nice Device or something like that back then. And then I just happened to write him back again like 6 months later, and he came out and we ended up hitting it off and hanging out. And we played with this other drummer for about maybe like 4 or 5 months. And he kind of turned out to be not so reliable, and so we were quest to find a drummer, which is probably one of the most difficult things.
Yeah.
Probably harder than finding a wife, I would say. We went through multiple people and just nothing fitting. And then we met this one dude, and he seemed really, really cool. He was kind of new at drums, but he had the right vibe. We felt we could work with him. And I remember we were really excited to kind of get this project going. And we were all driving to the Blind Pig for some dance night or something. And this guy called me in the car on the way there, and he's just like, yeah, man, I'm going back to grad school. I just don't think I can do a band. And I just remember just being so crushed. And then we went out, and that night I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm going to find a drummer tonight. Done deal. I'm calling it right now. So I was like, all right, how do I do this? How do I navigate this? I guess I'm going to like look for somebody who looks cool and then just ask them if they play the drums. So I went up to one guy and I was like, hey, man, you play drums? He's like, no. Up to another guy, kind of long, shaggy hair. And I'm like, hey, dude, you play drums by chance? He's like, no, I'm a guitar player. And then Rick was standing there and wearing a suit and a tie, kind of mod looking. And I'm like, hey, man, you play drums? And he goes, actually, I do. And that was history. That was 20 years ago. Valentine's Day will be 20 years.
How did you come up with the name Sisters of the Sunshine Vapor? Is there anything that relates to like something in a book? How did you guys come up with that name?
Long story short, marijuana. But we were actually we were under a different band name for about the first, how long did we play? It was like the first couple years we were called Sick Sick Nation. So we had a different name, and then we changed the name because the style was kind of changing. We were kind of being more expansive. But honestly, we wanted something that wasn't taken.
Mm-hmm.
And now there might be like a tad bit of regret now, just because it's just it's so long and it's so wordy, and people tend to forget it. But once you remember it, you never forget it. Kind of wanted something kind of glammy, but also kind of like ethereal, I guess.
So did you just like you said, smoke a joint or something and say, hey man, Sisters of the Sunshine?
I remember. I remember like talking just about like we wanted to change the name. And Eric wasn't on board. He was really like resistant at first. And I'm kind of like, dude, the music's changing.
Right.
We don't really like the name to begin with anymore. I think I got high one summer and I took out a notepad and just started writing down different words and kind of like moving them. Mm-hmm. Sort of like in an ad-lib sort of fashion, seeing which ones fit together. And then we kind of just all agreed on that. Like, yeah, that's cool.
Cool. I think it's a very cool
Thanks.
name. Like you say, it's a little long, but once you hear the music, it really relates to that. It really ties in with it. It's like, wow, yeah, I can see how that would be the name of the group. Speaking of which, like I had mentioned in the intro, you guys have got 6 full albums and several EPs. When did the band actually start recording, and where'd you record it?
So what we did is I told you that we did that drummer change when we found Rick at the Blind Pig. And when we kind of find out, like, hey, like, we can work with this guy, he shares the same vision as us as far as being in a band. And when we were still called Six Nation, and I think he probably, like I said, that was around like Valentine's Day 2005. So yeah, almost 20 years ago. And we kind of made it our goal that, like, hey, we're gonna just buckle down, get a handful of songs, make a demo, and just play these like crazy and just get them as tight as possible. And then I think we had like $1,000. We went to Jim Diamond when he used to have the ghetto recorders above like the Fox Theater or whatever that was over in that area, and we cut 4 songs for like $1,000 to 2-inch tape, and it sounded incredible. I mean, I think we're still looking to try and put that out on vinyl at some point, just because it was our first release. After that, we played a bunch of shows and did some things, and then we went and made another record under the name Six Nation, and we did it in Ann Arbor at this guy Jim Roll's studio, and just ended up hating everything about it. Hated the time it took to do it. Hated like just waiting months and months and having to come back and do overdubs and just trying to correct too many problems. And when that record came out, we just absolutely just hated it with a passion. I kind of made the suggestion. I was like, all right, what do we spend, like $3,000 to do this? I'm like, what if we bought $3,000 worth of gear? And so that, a couple months later, we did. Honestly, everything that we've done as Sisters, it's been self-recorded, self-produced. Everything has been recorded home studio by the band.
At your place, that place you had mentioned earlier?
Nope, I was in Livonia at that point, but I'm in Ferndale now, and yeah, we moved the studio here, and so we got a setup downstairs, and we record everything down there.
That's incredible, because I don't think anybody would really, well, maybe they would believe it today, because the technology for home studios is leaps and bounds from where it was.
For sure.
So, but I mean, the recordings are incredible. I mean, the sound, the production, the way the songs are put together. Now, as far as the songs, are you more or less the key songwriter, or do you guys more or less gel together and come up with these songs?
Every record's been kind of different. I mean, I write all the lyrics. I mean, I write all the words. I would say, all the vocal melodies. And then, every record's been kind of different. Like some of the, the first 3, we kind of were lots, like we're collaborative between the 3 of us. But later on, it would be, somebody would come with just like a loop of something. And we got into like making like, backing tracks and drum loops and stuff. And then using that as like a tool to sort of, inspire the writing process. And so, it's funny. I literally just got like a royalty check from BMI today, and we're all credited like 33 1/3% as far as writing goes. But I think it's one of those things. Yeah, I mean, if you're this singer or guitar player, and nobody else is writing or lyrics and stuff.
So as far as when you started, recording, your first album, I believe, came out in 2009. In the studio, are you using like Pro Tools? Is that kind of the system you're using for that, or have you changed into something different over the years?
So when we first did that one, that was the one where I said, like, hey, what if we took $3,000? What if we took what we were going to spend to make another record and bought gear? And I think we bought like a PreSonus just interface, which was compatible with, I think we've always used Cubase. Just a handful of just like 57 microphones, and then a couple of just, like overhead condensers for drums, and then for like vocals and stuff, just a couple of studio monitors and different things. And just kind of, I feel like a lot of it's not how expensive stuff you got. It's just how much time you have to do it. You go to the studio. I mean, I can't even imagine what studios charge now. I mean, probably $75 an hour minimum.
At least, or like, not more. Yeah.
Right. So if you book time there and you got a 10-hour block, and for whatever reason you're not feeling inspired or whatever, you're out of luck. That's your session. And by doing this, it's especially, and then we started with that first record, which is very basic, minimal, all digital equipment. And then after that, we bought a tape machine. We bought a 1/2-inch tape machine and started tracking stuff to tape, and then getting nicer microphones and stuff. And kind of at the end of the day, it's like our net cost is like almost zero to make records now. And then we started getting into outboard gear and preamps. Eric, the bass player, really kind of spearheaded and really got into the engineering aspect for the band, and which was fine, because I have no interest. I have no interest, and I have no idea how to do it.
Right.
If I want to just listen to something on my own, I got to call him up. All right, what do I turn on first?
Right.
So,
what's the trickiest part about doing that in a home studio as far as recording? Is it the drums? I mean, you use more mics. Does that take more time to do the drums?
Honestly, that's probably the biggest limitation. And we've talked about trying to go, because, you're in a, whatever it is, 8-foot 1920s bungalow
Right.
basement. So you're only going to be able to get so much space and dimension out of drum sound and that sort of thing. But as far as everything else, everything else is contained, vocals, guitars, everything else we're tracking separately. It doesn't really matter where you do that,
Right.
So I would say, getting a really good drum sound is still been a challenge. And we've talked about, trying to maximize that or go other places just for the drum back tracks. But at the end of the day, we always just end up just doing it here. I mean, we record every time we practice, we track and record everything. So if something magical was there, like, oh, we saved this now, everything's locked into a grid and we can come back and just start building a song on top of it.
Well, at the time you guys, do these recordings and have been doing these recordings, were you also out playing gigs? Were you out performing at the time also?
Yeah. I mean, we kind of have always kind of done that. I mean, we've been basically just working on new stuff, like on the 7th. Like, I mean, we have been for like the last year and a half, but in that time we toured with the Dandy Warhols 4 times. So we've done like 40 shows with them in the last year and a half. So, but yeah, I mean, we're always everything is kind of in conjunction. When we got down, if there's a tour that makes sense or a show that makes sense, we do it. And when we're not doing that, yeah, we're just tracking and working on stuff and trying to make new songs.
Yeah, I noticed you guys have played out quite a bit across the United States, and I think you played into Europe. How long have you actually been touring as far as that, like professionally?
I mean, I think probably after the first year, like, after, playing Detroit and Ann Arbor and kind of those surrounding areas, we were like, all right, cool, let's get out to Chicago. Let's get out to Cleveland. Let's try and start playing shows within like a 4, 5, 6 hour radius of Detroit. We did that. And then we did kind of like a couple East Coast, like Midwest, like, 2-3 week tours on our own. And then we went and did like 3 weeks in Europe back in 2015.
Wow.
And then we did it again in 2017, 2019. And then like did like a East Coast all the way to like LA tour with the Dandy Warhols a couple years. And then over the summer, we did 3 weeks with them in the Balkans and Eastern Europe. And that was, that was crazy too.
Now, do you guys, I know you've recorded your stuff independently and all that, but are you signed to a specific label? And when you tour, do you have any kind of backing, or is all this, as far as finances, coming out of your own pockets as far as that?
I mean, a lot of it. So we, the first couple records, it just made sense that we just did it on our own. I mean, we had a couple like people locally say like, hey, I can put it out, but it's going to take like a year and a half. And we're like, well, no, we're already done with the recording. We don't want to wait that long. So, we put together the funds and got like 200 records pressed at Archer and silk screened the covers ourselves, put them together and stuff, and just release it under Space Camp, our own label, and did that for the first 2, which is kind of cool because all those are super limited edition, just very rare pressings to find now. And then the third one we did before we toured Europe first time, a label in Spain, in Valencia, a guy had a small label and he wanted to put it out for us, and he did that and kind of booked us a handful of shows in Spain. And then at that time we had people in Greece that had been asking us to come out and play, and we got a handful of shows there, and we got a handful of shows in France. And so, I mean, that tour more than paid for itself because we didn't, like I said, we had recorded that record ourselves. The guy from Spain put it out, so we had no cost there, and then gave us like, 150 of the 500 records for free for us to sell. The record after that we put out on our own, and then the last 2 we did with this label out in Portland it's out in Seattle called Little Cloud. And same thing, they just do strictly vinyl. Like, we own all our own digital sales and distribution and all that, but they strictly do the vinyl. So it's same thing, like, we got to cover plane tickets and things like that, but usually like the hospitality when you play in Europe is pretty top notch. I mean, you don't pay for drinks, you usually don't pay for food. A lot of times you have like accommodations for the night and stuff like that. So sometimes you come out a little bit ahead, sometimes you break even, but
it's worth it in the end, obviously, because you're getting to do what you love.
Yeah, you get to see the world doing what you love. Absolutely. No regrets at all.
So you don't have any kind of management as far as these bookings? Who does the actual bookings? They just call you and say, hey, come out to France, and you just fly out there?
A lot of time, it was, when we were a younger band, like doing those first tours, it was kind of like, just like you do here. It's like, hey, you'd meet a band from Cleveland and be like, hey, you guys come out here and you can play, and then trade us a show and we'll come out there. And I don't know really how it works anymore in like the local scene, but that was kind of the real way to book a show. You know, you didn't really need a booking agent. You just found the bands that the bands put the show together, and you trade them and vice versa. And for a while, that's what we were doing. We had these friends that played in bands in Paris and stuff, and they would ask us to come out and do some shows. And when they were coming through here, we'd book a show for them, and it was great. And then we got teamed up with, you know, Dandy Warhol's heard our record, and they really liked it a lot. And they asked us to do the one tour, then they asked us to do another, then they asked us to do the one, you know, a couple more. And it just kind of got to the point where, you know, the band itself was just kind of asking us to do these tours and these shows. And, you know, but I mean, overall, no, we're still just like in-house, just self-managed.
That's cool. You said like when you go to Europe and you know some of these bands over there, then are they supplying you with, you know, a backline gear to play out there? Because you're not going to fly out drums and bass.
Right. So yeah, that was great. The first 3 tours we did, you know, we just showed up with just guitars and pedal boards and cymbals maybe and a handful of other things. And yeah, either the venues we were playing or the bands that we were playing with, everything, there was a backline, everything was right there. So it was great. Didn't have to carry things around, didn't pack stuff up at the end of the night. We could rent like a small car or like a station wagon and kind of drive around it. Great. And then with the Dandy Warhols and playing like in the Balkans and in Greece and Bulgaria and all these different places, like we can't play on their stuff. We had to like rent proper backline and get a driver and like a sprinter van. So that was the first time we had to do that. And I mean, it wasn't terrible. I mean, we had to do it either way. It didn't make sense for us to try and, you know, rent gear on our own.
What were some of the places you're talking about over in Europe? Were these like clubs like here in the States, or were they like arenas? What kind of venues were you playing at over there?
It was kind of a multitude of places. I would say most probably would have been like a St. Andrews equivalent, like around like 12 to 1,500 people. And then there were some that were much bigger. Like it was like a proper like outdoor like amphitheater in Bulgaria that we played for that show. And you know,
were these like festivals that you're playing in the outdoor type places? I
mean, small festivals, you know, like only like, you know, 3-4 bands, but it was summertime in Europe. So, I mean, everything's, I guess, technically a festival, but.
How were you when you originally went over there? I mean, obviously you had a tie with a band or something to get over there. What was the response to, you know, by the audience to your music initially?
Well, I mean, it's cool because like I said, we had, even from the early days, for whatever reason, people in Greece really loved us. So we went over there in 2015 and then hadn't been back, you know, since the summer. So we hadn't been there for 10 years, and there were tons of people that had seen us the first time, like in Athens and different places. And just, I mean, overall, in general, I mean, every time we've been there 5 times, I think. People there, their reception to music is just a whole lot different than what you're used to. I mean, people are just really excited to buy your stuff, to talk to you, and just ask you for autographs. And you just, you know, it's an overall just really, really good feeling.
When you're over there or you're touring here, either way, are you selling your own merch, or does that have to be sold online? How would they get your merch as far as that? And what kind of merch would you have other than your recordings?
I mean, we pretty much would just, so we got a guy, there's actually 4 of us. There's a dude that does visuals and kind of, I wouldn't call him a roadie. He's the visual. He doesn't show up practice ever, but he's been with for like the last 15, 16 years. He's a guy named Wayne. He does all our kind of lights and visuals and kind of syncs everything up. And sometimes like while we're setting stuff up, he'll watch merch, or we all kind of just would just kind of rotate sort of thing. We've never really brought anybody specifically just to do merch.
Other than the Dandy Warhols, who else have you toured with, like in the States or maybe over there?
We've done like a couple small runs with King Buffalo. They're like kind of a stoner rock band from upstate New York. A couple small runs with the Budos band, also from New York. You know, we've done the Austin Psych Fest, played with the Black Angels a handful of times.
And what would you say as far as playing here in the States would have been some of the bigger, I mean, I don't mean Detroit necessarily, but some of the bigger type of venues that you would have played? Any like stadium type shows or things like that here in the States with any of these groups?
Like Webster Hall in New York, which is a pretty decent sized theater, you know, like with the Dandy Warhols. the Fonda in LA.
Wow. So you've been across the entire scope of the United States. You basically played East Coast to West Coast. That's outstanding. I also noticed on YouTube you've got several videos that you've made. Are those also ones that you guys did yourself, or did you go into a production studio and have those done, or how'd those come about?
A handful we have done ourselves. So some were just like, hey, there's this random idea, we can do this ourselves on a Friday night with a couple beverages, and and the concept is there. We can try this on our own. And then we've also had friends who were very big into film and shooting and stuff, and wanted to collaborate and do it basically free. And so we would do things like that. Never really like same thing with like the recording. Never really gone back and gone into like a proper place and booked time. Everything's kind of done in-house by the band.
Right.
So.
Well, kudos to you, because you guys are doing some top-notch work. As far as recordings, like your last album came out in 2024, are you guys in the process of working up some new material for possibly, a future release, maybe next year or something?
Yeah, I mean, that's been the plan. I mean, so we put that out in 2024, then immediately did like 3 weeks with the Danny Warhols, like East Coast. And then I said St. Louis, Denver, LA. So we did that, did a handful of shows with them over the summer. In the meantime, we have been chipping away at new ideas. Got about nine new songs we've been kind of demoing and working on. And like I said, same thing, just every practice recording or listening back or just trying to find the right layer.
Anyway, I'm going to let you go, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me tonight. Like I said, your music is incredible. I hope you guys continue to do that, more touring and stuff. Hopefully I can see you locally somewhere, Magic Bag or some club here in Detroit, because what I've seen of you, it's just mind-blowing, man. It's just incredible.
Thank you, brother. Keep in touch, man.
All right, will do, man. And you have a good night.
You too. Happy holidays, man.
You too. Thank you so much.
Psychiatrist, making a fist. Trying to
Well, that was Sean Morrow from Sisters of the Sunshine Vapor. It's hard to describe their music. You would just have to hear it. It's obviously psychedelic. I mentioned progressive, and what I really meant by that is more progressive in the sense of new and modern. It's not like your 60s psychedelic like Pink Floyd or King Crimson. They've definitely taken it to a new modern level. And stuff. The production on the records are incredible. And to think that they're doing it all in-house on their own. Like I was saying, I know the technology for home studios has come a long way, but you still have to know how to do it. You still have to know how to operate it. Like he said, set up the mics, especially recording drums. That can be really tricky, I know. It's just incredible. They've done a lot of touring, over the years. Basically, since the band started, they took off and were just doing everything, playing all over the United States, over in Europe. There's a lot to be said for that, especially in this day and age where a lot of bands just don't really get to do that. They don't get to get outside of their own comfort zone, let's just say, as far as like Michigan. So I wish the band, the best of luck to continue creating more exciting music for the future. And I think if you haven't heard these guys, you really need to check them out. They're on Spotify. They're obviously on YouTube and probably all the other streaming services. Definitely check them out. Again, the name of the band is Sisters of the Sunshine Vapor. Hey, is that old stereo system of yours giving you the blues? Maybe the receiver has a blown channel or the turntable just doesn't work right. Well, then you should visit my friends at 7 Grand Audio Service. They've been in business for over 40 years, located at 25642 7 Mile Road in Redford Township. The owner, Dash, and his assistant, Harry, can fix just about anything. I'm talking receivers, tape decks, turntables, EQs, power amps, and yes, guitar and bass amps. Phone number over there is 313-533-3635. We're open Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. If you have any issues with your stereo equipment at all, whether it be newer or older equipment, doesn't matter. You need to check them out. And tell them Jimmy sent you. Anyway, with all that being said, like I always say, keep rocking.